For the first time in 2 months, the United States has surpassed more than 1,000 COVID-19 deaths in a single day. Arizona, Florida, and Texas are some of the hardest hit states right now. Each of them reported more than 100 deaths Tuesday, bringing the total death toll to more than 142,000 across the United States. The climbing numbers comes as the CDC estimates COVID-19 infections in some parts of the country could actually be 13 times higher than reported. And after months of downplaying the virus's threat to American lives and with little more than 100 days to go until the November election, President Trump took to the White House podium alone yesterday, where he delivered his most realistic assessment yet of the ongoing health crisis plaguing the nation.
The China virus is a vicious and dangerous illness, but we've learned a great deal about it and who it targets. Some areas of our country are doing very well, others are doing less well. It will probably, unfortunately, get worse before it gets better. Something I don't like saying about things, but that's the way it is. If you can, use the mask. When you can, use the mask. If you're close to each other, if you're in a group, I would put it on when I'm in a group. Anything that potentially can help, and that certainly can potentially help, is a good thing. I have no problem. I carry it. I wear it.
When he was speaking about Florida, the president also said Florida is in a big, tough position. Ben Tracy is following the latest at the White House. Ben, none of the doctors on the coronavirus task force joined the president for the briefing yesterday. At one point, the president pointed, I guess, to another room and said Dr. Birx is in that room, which, of course, begs the question, why is she in the other room and not at the podium with you? Did we learn anything new about the president's plans to fight the pandemic or to improve testing?
Well, I think there's two things here. There's the style and the substance of what we saw yesterday. Stylistically, this was the White House wanting to put the president out there alone and say that he is in charge of this issue. That's why you did not have what we used to see in these briefings where you'd have maybe, 6 to 8 people standing up there around him, all taking turns doing presentations. The door that he pointed to was back to the press office, where apparently Dr. Birx had briefed him before he came out and was still there. We should note Dr. Fauci said that he was not invited to this briefing and that he had not briefed the president since last week. But this was very much the White House wanting to put the president out there alone to convey this information to the American people. Now, in terms of the information, a lot of attention has been paid to the president's change in tone. There was not a ton of substance, though, when you really drill down to what he said. He at one point said, "We are developing a strategy that's going to be very strong and powerful." We're many, many, many months into this, and I just asked Kellyanne Conway here in the driveway, why are you just now developing a strategy? And they don't have a great answer for that. The president also said he's now open to expanding testing when just a few days ago his administration was fighting against more funding for that. So there is a real question about whether or not there is anything more to this than kind of the public relations part of it, if there will be a real shift in strategy and plan and funding to really combat the coronavirus in the country.
Yeah, because what people really need to know is, how are they going to get along over the next few months? And the White House and Congress have been going back and forth about the next relief bill. They're really up against the clock because that extra $600 in unemployment, that ends this week. What do we know about negotiations?
There is a big gulf between the Democrats and the Republicans on Capitol Hill in terms of what they want, and that gulf is $2 trillion. You have Republicans saying no more than $1 trillion. You have the Democrats saying we want a $3 trillion stimulus bill. But then more interestingly, perhaps, is this fight within the Republican Party over whether or not there should be a stimulus at all. You're hearing from some congressmen, the more fiscally conservative of them, saying this is just insane that we would spend another $1 trillion, and especially over the issue of stimulus checks, because the White House and the Republican leadership is backing sending more direct payments to families in the country, and the Democrats are obviously for that as well. But you now have some kind of the fiscal hawks in the Republican Party say this is just crazy that we would send more direct payments to people. So there are some agreements over funding for schools, over stimulus checks, but there are big disagreements because the Democrats want aid for states and local governments. The Republicans do not want to do that. And then there are issues over how much money is going to be allocated for testing. And then you mentioned that $600 enhanced unemployment benefit. That's crucial because it does run out at the end of the week. The White House has signaled an openness to continuing it, but at a lower level. The Democrats say it should continue where it is.
Ben, is it at all surprising that there's this gulf that has now loomed between the President of the United States and lawmakers, including members of his own party? They are seeing the same poll numbers that has compelled the president to take to that podium yesterday. And yet, the gulf exists within the administration. I mean, there was this surreal moment where hours earlier, you all were there in the briefing room where Kayleigh McEnany said to you that the president was tested several times a day. She promised when she first took that position never to lie to the White House press corps. I don't know what she meant by that, because the president, in coming to the podium, said to you all that he only gets tested once every couple of days. And then there's the other moment where you asked him directly a question and he told you the virus would disappear. Again, repeating something that is simply not true. So what are you hearing about this gulf that exists between the administration, the American people, and GOP lawmakers as well?
Well, and that issue of how often the president is tested, that's not just an issue of whether or not he contradicted his own press secretary. The president getting tested every single day, they call him the most tested person in the world, is significant because that is the White House's rationale for why the president does not wear a mask, why he doesn't have to adequately social distance around his aides. But the president saying, I'm tested every 2 to 3 days, that's a very different scenario. It does call into question if it's really only every 2 to 3 days, why she would say multiple times a day. The president made it pretty clear yesterday. He said, I can't think of a time I've been tested more than once in a day. So clearly they're not on the same page with that. You mentioned the polling, though. The interesting thing about that when it comes to his relationship with Congress is the president's decline in the polls, his relative unfavorability in the country has given Republicans on the Hill more space to kind of operate against his wishes. This is why you see the president demanding a payroll tax cut and basically all the Republicans throwing cold water on that and saying, we don't want that. That's not something that probably would have happened 6 months ago.
That's so true. Listen, Ben, I want to ask you about something that's been unfolding this morning. We have learned that the U.S. has ordered that the Chinese consulate in Houston be closed. There are a couple of reports out there that there may have been a possible fire there. We don't know. The Secretary of State spoke earlier today about this. What can you tell us? As I also understand it, Beijing has been pushing back on this decision.
Yeah, this is a big deal. This is a real escalation in tensions between the two countries. Basically, the State Department is saying that they ordered that consulate in Houston to be shut down, and they're accusing the Chinese government of systematic spying on the U.S. It's unclear at this point why specifically they chose that location. And it's also unclear what exactly was being burned at that consulate. You can see there in the video that there obviously was a fire in a courtyard there. There is speculation that they were basically burning documents before they had to vacate the premises. The government apparently gave them about 72 hours to close that all down. The Chinese government has come out. They have vowed to retaliate. They're saying that this is illegal, what the U.S. government has done. And there is speculation that the Chinese their retaliation would be to close a consulate in that country. And there are reports that that could be the consulate in Wuhan, which is believed to be where this virus originated. That might not have as much teeth as you might think, because most of the Americans who were working in that consulate have already left Wuhan.
All right, Ben Tracy, thank you so much.
Thanks.